your man, Louie Tee. Welcome to the 2018 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series where your man, Louie Tee, aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2018 NFL Draft using our baseball grading scale. Single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the Draft Wrap-Up Series, as we cannot tell how these players are going to pan out, and I don't want to discount any of these young men before they get their chance in the National Football League. And so, we'll get a score for each and every single player selected in said team's draft. Apply bonuses when necessary. Divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right. You, the viewer, are in total control as this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos stating two things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. Examples would be Vikes, next, Vikings, next, Vikings, next, Minnesota. You get where I'm going with this. You want to be as fast as possible, so you want to be as straight to the point as possible. So men next would be your best option if you're looking to get a team up. 3 letters. Give me the abbreviation. I know who you're talking about. You're going to get in there as quickly as possible. And with that being said, next team up in this series is none other than the Minnesota Vikings. Skull! And before we start this breakdown, I want to send my deepest condolences to the Sparano family and the Minnesota Vikings organization for the loss of offensive line coach Tony Sparano, who passed away tragically, unexpectedly yesterday at the age of 56 years old. Details on what happened are still really just, at this point, it doesn't even matter how he passed away as long as there was no foul play involved. If I had to guess, I'd say it was probably a heart attack or something of that nature. But in any event, he was a guy that was well-traveled in this league. He was currently working for the Minnesota Vikings. We all know he was the head coach of the Oakland Raiders at one point, the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. He worked for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He worked for the Washington Redskins. He worked for a number of organizations around the league. He was well-traveled. He was well-liked. He was well-respected. Most importantly, though, he was well-loved by those he came in contact with by all accounts. And so this was a tragic loss right before the start of training camp, and my heart goes out to his family and his extended family, that being his NFL family as well. And so rest in peace, Tony Sparano. With that being said, the Vikings, 8-player draft. This is where they do their damage. This is where Rick Spielman and company do their damage right here. This is why the Vikings are right now one of the prohibited favorites to come out of the NFC and represent the conference in the Super Bowl in 2018. They do the draft as good as anyone in the NFC, and they don't do a lot in free agency. They don't make a bunch of waves. This was one of the rare off seasons where they went out and made a splash by going out and acquiring Kirk Cousins in free agency, but generally they try to stay away from free agency because they want to spend their money on their own guys, and that's the right way to do it. Rick Spielman has always said, I value the draft over free agency, and that is the way you win in this league. You get guys on the cheap, you get guys that are talented, guys that are young, and when their contract is up, if they're worthy, you spend your money there, not chasing other teams' free agents. Vikings found that out the hard way with Greg Jennings once upon a time, so they don't do the free agency thing very often, and this is where they do their damage. This wasn't one of my favorite Vikings drafts, I'll tell you that right off the top, but there are some talented players and some potential gems in this draft. When it's all said and done, if guys pan out and they get the most out of some of these players, this could be one of their most productive drafts when it's all said and done. But in any event, let's take a look at the Minnesota Vikings 2018 NFL Draft, and we start in the first round, 30th overall selection, defensive back out of UCF. Mike Hughes is the selection. So I've already broken down Tony Sparano. I've already broken down Mike Hughes, so I'm not going to do that here on this particular program. But if you're looking for an extensive breakdown of Mike Hughes and what he brings to the table, check out the Louie Tee Network on YouTube. Click on the playlist section and check out the Draft Prospects 101 series, where you'll find a thorough breakdown of Mike Hughes and some of the other players I was able to get to prior to the draft. I'll tell you this, I wasn't totally in love with Mike Hughes as a cover corner necessarily. Doesn't have top end speed, but the thing that I do like about him is I love his feet. I love his change of direction. I love his ability to get in and out of breaks, to stick his foot in the ground and drive on the football, that click and close ability that you're looking for. I think he's a guy that has the versatility to play outside or inside, and I think the Vikings could use an upgrade in the slot. I think the Vikings could potentially use an upgrade out wide. We'll see what happens with Trey Waynes. He's an on and off guy. He's hot. He's cold. You never know what Trey Waynes is going to show up. You already know you've got one of the best corners out wide in Xavier Rhodes. All roads closed. So now you need a guy across from him. Is Trey Waynes that guy or not? We're going to see. I think this is a pivotal year for Trey Waynes. But I don't like Mackenzie Alexander. Anyone that knows me knows I'm not a fan of Mackenzie Alexander. And so I'd love to see a guy like Mike Hughes come in and compete for that job right away and see if he can't get on the field and get snaps as your nickel and still give you something out wide if need be as well. But nonetheless, that's not where the versatility stops with this guy. He also can double as a kickoff returner and a punt returner. So this guy brings a lot of versatility to the table. Here's a guy that a lot of people were talking up as a top 15 pick and one of the first corners off the board. You know, you get closer to the draft, teams start really probing in. They talk about some of the off-the-field issues and why he transferred from North Carolina to UCF, and then you start looking at things, you start picking things apart, speed, this, that, the third, size, whatever, and all of a sudden he falls to the end of the first round, which I think is excellent value for this guy. Had he went a lot sooner, I thought that would have been a mistake, but getting this guy at the end of the first round at a position that isn't necessarily a need, but a guy that is probably best value available at 30, gotta love the pick. And the reason why I really love this selection, more so than anything I've said for the past 5 minutes, is because of the fact he's going to Minnesota with a coach that is going to cultivate his skill set in Zimmer. And Zim loves the D-backs. Z's going to coach him up. And because of that, in the first round, 30th overall selection, defensive back out of Central Florida, Mike Hughes, for me, is...
Hits one high! Hits it deep! It is out of here!
As we move to the second round, 62nd pick overall, offensive lineman out of Pitt, Brian O'Neill is the selection. .6'7", 297 pounds stands Brian O'Neill. Here's a guy that is an athletic marvel, and his type of athleticism can be intoxicating. You have to be careful when you assess tackles and you see a guy with this much athleticism, because you can be spellbound by that kind of athleticism. You fall in love with the athleticism, and sometimes you're not paying attention to the technical things and aspects of the game, i.e. TJ Clemmings, and Vikings fans know about that all too well. As a matter of fact, similar situation, similar tackle, similar school. So same school, not similar school, same school. So you're hoping this isn't the reincarnation of TJ Clemmings, but I'll tell you this much, this guy is an athletic marvel when you watch him. He started out as a tight end at Pitt, and that's probably the best way to explain why this guy is so athletically gifted as a tackle. 4'8", 240, which is insane for a 300-pound guy. But when you watch him move, you're like, this is ridiculous. They threw him the football a couple of times. I watched him catch a pass versus NC State, almost score a touchdown. I watched him almost throw a touchdown pass versus Northwestern in the bowl game in 2016. So they got creative. And again, when you see this kind of athleticism at tackle, you get a little stupid sometimes, and you start trying things that maybe you shouldn't be trying on the regular, but they got creative with him at Pitt. That is for certain. 22 reps of 2 1/4, 34-inch arms, played in 38 games, started 25 of them straight to end his career, which began, like I said before, as a tight end at Pitt. 12 at left tackle, 13 at right tackle in terms of starts. So I wanted to get a feel for this guy on both sides of the line. So I watched him in 2016 when he started 12 games at right tackle, and then I went back and watched him a couple of times in 2017 when he was at left tackle. And I'm here to tell you I like him better as a left tackle than I do a right tackle. Maybe that had a little bit to do with him just being a year more seasoned in 2017 when he was at the left side due to some injuries. But nonetheless, we'll see what happens with him at the next level. Let's talk about this guy and what he brings to the table. Measurables at 6'7", 297. He's going to have to put on more weight. That's not anything that anyone doesn't already know. He knows he's going to have to put on more weight, and I fully expect him to put on weight. And it wouldn't shock me if by the time we got to the first game in the preseason, this guy's already 305, 307 pounds or so. So I'm not really worried about his weight. I love the 6'7". I love the 34-inch arms, however. That has left tackle, right tackle written all over it. Really has left tackle written all over it, if you want to be honest. But we'll see, again, what the Vikings decide to do with Brian O'Neill. Athleticism, talked about the ex-tight end background, talked about him catching a pass versus NC State, talked about him on a jet sweep getting the football essentially and throwing a pass versus Northwestern. So they used him quite a bit in the athleticism. When he pulls, is exquisite to watch. Me being a Redskins fan and watching Trent Williams get out in front of a screen or be the kick-out block on a wide receiver screen, it's just fun. Like I said, it can be intoxicating at times to watch a guy that big run that fast, and he's got that kind of athletic skill set, similar to a guy like a Trent Williams that can get out in front of a screen and be 35 yards down the field and keeping up with the receiver, running back, whomever, step for step. He's got that kind of athleticism. So that's something that has to make the Vikings gush, and it's amazing. And it is actually rather sad. I heard the Vikings talking about how excited Tony Sperano was to work with this guy, and now he's gone. It's a shame, but technique, when he moves his feet, he's fine. But when he stops and lunges, he gets into trouble, which that's any offensive lineman. Some guys can get away with it better than others, but for the most part, you don't want to stop your feet as an offensive lineman, especially when you don't have a guy locked up. You don't have a guy in your hands, essentially, and have him hemmed up. You got to keep your feet moving, and sometimes he'll stop his feet, lunge, and that will get him into trouble. And to me, his hand placement isn't great to begin with. I think his hand placement is outside of the pads a lot of times. I can see him picking up some holding penalties at the next level. And when he gets beat, I'm surprised he hadn't picked up a lot more holding penalties, because his favorite thing to do when he gets beat is to pretty much hog tie a guy or grab him by the shoulder pad and kind of tug him. And he got away with it quite a bit at Pitt, but I think at the next level, he is going to get flagged for those transactions or transgressions, I should say. So hopefully he's able to clean that up, but nonetheless, he's pretty solid in terms of his technique. Anchor needs to put on a little weight. Again, I've already mentioned that. That's not new news. Anyone that has seen him and watched him play knows that he's going to have to put on a little bit of weight to put a little bit more sand in his trunks. But even though he gives up a little bit of ground on bull rushes, he usually bows his back and is able to stand his ground and stop the bleeding and not allow a guy to push him directly back into the quarterback. So despite him needing to gain more weight, I think he does an adequate job of standing up to the bull rush. Balance is solid, even though I feel like he cut blocks a little bit too much for me and ends up on the ground, but his balance is fine. Redirect is good, especially for a guy his size. He changes directions really well. Toughness, good. Run blocking and pass blocking, I think, are equally good. I like him in the run game as a guy that will sustain blocks. I don't love him necessarily out in space as much as I should because of his athleticism. I think he moves so fast that he doesn't get a chance to break down and get a guy and actually put a body on a body. A lot of times he's just running around in space, so he doesn't necessarily do anything. But when he does get his hands on guys, he does a really good job of sealing and walling off guys and creating a barrier between the ball carrier and the defender. Finish is solid. Awareness. I don't love his awareness right now. It'll get better. I feel like, again, you're talking about a guy that came to Pitt as a tight end and a guy that only started 25 games. So I think with more experience, he'll get better at certain things. But I like guys, and I talked about this with Quentin Nelson when Notre Dame was playing against NC State. Your tackle has Nick Chubb, or not Nick Chubb, Bradley Chubb one-on-one, and you have no one to block. Are you going to help the center who is holding his own against the defensive tackle, or are you going to go out and help your tackle who's one-on-one with Bradley Chubb? I think it's a no-brainer. You go help your tackle double off Bradley Chubb and make sure that he doesn't impact this play. Same thing here, but it was a much more dire situation, and Brian O'Neill, I thought, dropped the ball. So they had the protection pinched down inside to make sure that nothing was going to come free from the A-gap. So Brian O'Neill essentially slid inside, allowed Bradley Chubb one-on-one with the running back. O'Neill had no one to block, essentially, as NC State bluffed the A-gap blitz. And so he had no one to block on the play. So he looks around, and essentially goes and helps the guard instead of going and helping the running back with Bradley Chubb. Now, luckily enough for him, the running back held his own against Chubb and was able to hold him off and allow the quarterback to deliver the football. But that's the lack of awareness I'm talking about. You need to know who's on the field, where they are at all times, and know, okay, Chubb's over there one-on-one with a running back. I need to go over there and make sure he doesn't get to the quarterback. He didn't do that. And then on a TE game versus Syracuse, I just thought he was extremely late, almost as if he didn't see what was going on in front of him. Allowed a guy inside, hog-tied him, should have been called for holding, got away with it. I'd like to see him diagnose that sooner and be able to cut off the inside lane there, not allow a guy looping around to come and split you in the guard and get to the quarterback and get pressure. I need him to cut that off and be able to get in front of that guy and stop that pursuit. So I feel like his awareness is a little slow in certain situations. That, I think, will increase with more playing time. Recovery is solid, but again, I told you, I don't love him from a recovery standpoint. When he gets beat, his first inclination is to grab and hold, and I think he's going to be flagged at the next level for that. Him pulling, though, it's fun to watch this guy get out in front of a play, get out in space. Doesn't always block anyone, but just the fact that he's able to get to the second level with such ease. He's one of those guys that can climb to the second level, climb to that third and final level, and be a guy that can be off to the races and be the kick-out block that sends a guy on his way for a 65-yard touchdown run. He's got that kind of capability. Availability is outstanding as well. He's a guy that played in 38 games in college, only missed one game in his entire collegiate career, and started 25 straight to wrap up. And remember, this guy's a redshirt junior. It's not like this guy's a senior. So 38 games is a ton for a guy that only played 3 years of college football. So there are no cons with Brian O'Neill, just a bunch of upside here. And I would have loved to have seen Tony Sperano get his hands on Brian O'Neill because of the athleticism this guy brings to the table. There are some little kinks and tweaks that need to be made, but I feel like this guy has a much better potential than TJ Clemmings did. And I was really, really gushing over TJ Clemmings when you drafted him. I thought he was going to be a really good acquisition for the Vikings. Feel the same way about Brian O'Neill. Let's hope that we don't get the same results here out of O'Neill that you did with TJ Clemmings. Like I said, you always want to be a little leery of guys that are uber athletic, because sometimes you can fall in love with the athleticism and ignore some of the flaws. I think O'Neill is clean enough that the flaws that he does have are easily correctable, and you have a guy on your hands that could be a really good lineman for you at the next level. Really like what he brings to the table in the second round. 30 or 62nd pick overall. Offensive lineman out of Pitt, Brian O'Neill, for me, is So we go to the 4th round, 102nd overall selection. The Ohio State University defensive lineman Jalen Holmes is the selection. Okay, so let me make an admission right off the top because I don't want to hold this from you. I'm a little biased here, okay? This guy went to my high school. I followed his entire career at Ohio State, watched this guy continue to grow and develop and blossom. Never really got a chance to start until his final year on campus. Look, can you blame the coaching staff at Ohio State? You had both of the Boza boys, Nick and Joey, there through his entire tenure. You also had Taquan Lewis, and you also had Sam Hubbard there. So it was tough for this guy to get on the field at the defensive end position. So they got smart, started moving this guy around, interior defensive line, defensive end, start moving this guy around up and down the defensive line to get him more reps. And he was I felt like an integral part of that Ohio State defense. One of my favorite games was one that he was unheralded in. Didn't make a bunch of plays, but it was his interior pressure, his interior pursuit, and his ability to stay at home and be aware that I thought bottled up Saquon Barkley versus Penn State. Remember, Penn State jumped out to a big lead in that game, and Ohio State slowly but surely just chipped away at that lead, chipped away, and Saquon Barkley's numbers on the ground were grotesque in that game. Now, he had an impact, had a big run for a touchdown, also had a kick return for a touchdown, but if you look at his rushing numbers, you take away that one big run that he had, Saquon Barkley was neutralized in that game, one of his worst games of his collegiate career, and a lot of that credit should go to Jalen Holmes. If you watch that game, a lot of Saquon Barkley looking to double back and turn around and run in circles was because where he was looking to go, that gap was restricted or blocked altogether by Jalen Holmes. And so I'm a little biased. I'm not going to lie to you. Jalen Holmes is near and dear to my heart just because he went to Lake Taylor High School. So we both Titans, brothers in arms. And so I want to see this guy win a little bit more than I do the average draft pick for any other team, but not named the Washington Redskins. But in any event, 6'5", 283 is Jalen Holmes. 34-inch arms, so you're talking about a long, athletic athlete here. 4'8", 240, 25 reps of 2 1/4, 5 career sacks to go along with 14 tackles for loss, 4 PBUs, and 3 forced fumbles. Only 9 career starts, all of them coming in 2017. So this is a guy in 48 games that didn't get a chance to start, but played a bunch of snaps. I don't want you to think that because he didn't start, he didn't see the field a ton at Ohio State. He was on the field in a rotation, and he was on the field a ton throughout his career. Measurables, you've got to love 6'5", 280, and 34-inch arms. This guy's measurables makes him such an appealing player. And I'm going to tell you where I think he best benefits this Vikings team a little bit later on in this breakdown. But athleticism, tremendous athlete, and I told you the length that goes with that athleticism makes it that much more appealing and appetizing when looking at Jalen Holmes' paws and what he brings to the table. Hand usage, he does use his hands well, and I think just by osmosis of being around the Boza boys, you're going to use your hands at Ohio State. They do a really good job. A lot of those guys use their hands well, and Jalen Holmes is a guy that's smacking down hands, trying to defeat blocks by using his hands. So I think he's already going in with a good foundation of how to use his hands, and I think it'll only get better at the next level. Awareness, this is where I think he really stands out, and I was really pleasantly surprised. I think he shines in the awareness department. I'll put down in my notes, gets his hands up in passing lanes. He's 6'5", and when he knows he's not going to get home, does a great job of putting his hands up. Versus Oklahoma in 2016, he deflects a pass that Jerome Baker ends up picking off and taking to the crib in the route of Oklahoma in Norman. So he was huge in that game, making a play that resulted directly in a pick six. That was early in that game when it was 14-7, and the balance of that game still there. That pick really started the avalanche that Oklahoma couldn't stop. So this is a guy that will get his hands up in the passing lanes and knock the football down. Saw him do it again versus Sam Darnold in USC in the bowl game. So he's a guy that will get his hands on the football in the passing lane. So I love that awareness. And then I also love the fact that when he's able to defeat a block initially in the run game, he's not a guy that's going to defeat a block and just willy-nilly run up the field. Okay, he's a guy that's looking and feeling out the play. He defeats a block, he comes down the line flat. And instead of going up the field, he shrinks and constricts the hole, and a lot of times is there to make the tackle. And that's what I was referencing when I talked about his performance versus Penn State. Won't show up in the stat sheet because he didn't make a bunch of tackles for loss in that game, but it was his activity up front and his awareness of where Saquon Barkley was trying to bounce runs, trying to cut runs back to. It was his ability to restrict holes that allowed Ohio State's defense to rally to the football and really bottle up Saquon Barkley in that football game. Point of attack physicality, he does a really good job of extending his arms to bench press offensive linemen, keep them at bay, and allow him to hold the point of attack. Redirect, again, I told you this guy's a long, fluid athlete, so he's able to change directions seamlessly. Ability versus the run, love him in the run game as a guy that stands his ground and is able to shed defenders when need be to get into the tackle. Pass rushing ability, I really think that this guy, and I talked about this earlier and I foreshadowed what I was going to talk about later on. Well, here it is. I think that this guy's greatest strength moving to the next level, and I watched this guy, he had 5 career sacks. He could have easily had 15 career sacks. He just missed about a good 5 to 7 sacks just because he was a step late. And this guy's got a spin move that he uses that is beautifully executed. He's got quickness, he's got length, he's got hands, he's got everything you're looking for. And I'm gonna tell you right now, I watched him at Ohio State watched them slide him inside to defensive tackle as a 3-tech. And I'm telling you, that's where his greatest value is. If you kick this guy inside in nickel packages and nickel sets where you're looking to get your best pass rushers on the field, you put this guy inside versus a guard or versus a center, he's going to win that matchup a number of times. And I'm telling you right now, he's going to be a problem, a big, big problem for opposing teams. Inside is an interior pass rusher. Look out for Jalen Holmes as a guy the Vikings kick inside, and I'm telling you, he's going to win some matchups inside. I love what this guy brings to the table as an interior pass rusher. Don't love him as much as an edge rusher coming off the edge, going up against the tackle, but I love him going up against the opposition's guard or center. I watched him whip the ass of the guard late in the game versus Penn State for a sack of McSorley, where he literally beat the guard, then jumped over him and wrapped up McSorley for a sack. That's what he brings to the table. The ability to win with quickness versus a guard, win with length versus a guard, beat the guard with the spin move because he's so worried about getting beat to the outside with speed. Boom, he oversets to the outside, spin back inside. I saw him win, and if not for a couple of well-timed double teams where he spins off the guard and here comes the center to help, this guy would have had a lot more sacks at Ohio State. So I'm telling you right now, the pass rush ability from the interior is there with Jalen Holmes, and I think that's where his greatest success will come at the next level. If the Vikings are smart, that's where they'll try to utilize this guy because I think that's where his impact will be its greatest. Motor and endurance, I thought they were both good at Ohio State, and his impact on the game I thought was really good for a guy that didn't start but was a rotational depth pass rusher and run defender, and a guy that they moved up and down the line, a guy that knew what his role was on the defense, played it well, took on blockers, ate up space, got his hands in passing lanes, and when the opportunity arose, made a sack or two. Really like what Jalen Holmes brings to the table, and to me, he personifies what this Vikings defense is. Long, fast, physical, and he brings all of those traits to the table and then some. Love this pickup in the 4th round. 102nd overall selection. Ohio State defensive lineman Jalen Holmes, for me, is as we mosey along to the 5th round, 157th overall selection, Central Michigan tight end Tyler Conklin is the selection. (6'3", 254 pounds is Tyler Conklin. 4'8", 40, and that's a legit 4'8". Didn't see much more speed than that on tape. 18 reps of 2 1/4, 38-inch vert. So the guy does have a little bit of explosiveness, and it comes in little bursts. You're not going to see that translate into long distance speed, but if you're talking about quick little bursts and the ability to go up and get the football, that's where you see it shine there. 10-foot broad, so again, you're seeing a guy that's able to use a little bit of explosion there. Ex-basketball player, so you're seeing a lot more of this. This is becoming a lot more prevalent. Guys that had dreams of playing hoops, realizing, damn, I'm 6'3", and I'm probably not going to be able to play at a high level moving forward. Let me make the transition of football and see if I can't use this frame where I was small as a basketball player, I'm all of a sudden a big guy as a football player. Let me see if I can't use my ex-basketball background, being able to rebound, box guys out, things of that nature, to benefit me as a pass catcher. Generally, guys that come from basketball have really good, soft hands. You see that with Conklin. His hands are extraordinary. Really plucks the football out of the air and away from his frame. Makes a ton of contested catches. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But in 2015, that was his first year after transferring. That was his first year playing tight end. 6 catches, 95 yards, no touchdowns. So this is what you want to see. After that first year, guy gets his feet wet, understands what it takes to be a tight end. Now you're looking for that quantum leap, and that's exactly what you got in 2016. 42 catches, 560 yards, 6 touchdowns in 13 games. He was on pace to shatter that in 2017 had he not missed 5 games to start the season with a broken foot. So guy had 35 grabs, 504 yards, and 5 touchdowns in just 8 games. So those numbers were going to climb exponentially in 2017 if not for the missed games to start the season. So here's a guy that is on the up and up, and I like what he brings to the table, not just as a pass catcher, but also as a guy that competes as a blocker, and not just a run blocker, but a guy that you can also keep in as a protector in the pass game as well. Measurables at 6'3", 254. Has a little bit of size on him at 254 pounds. A lot of these guys come into the league at 245 pounds because they're athletically gifted and catch the football, but not really looking to block. That extra 10, 11 pounds that he has on him that these other tight ends don't allows him to be a little bit more stout up front as a blocker. Speed, not one of his strong suits. That 4'8", like I said, is legit. He's not going to outrun many guys, not going to separate from many guys, as we'll talk about his lack of quickness a little bit later on. Pass catching ability, his ability to catch in traffic is uncanny. I can't tell you how many times I watched this guy with a defender on his back, draped all over him, catch the football. That's going to serve him well at the next level because he's going to need to be able to catch the football in traffic because he's not going to create a ton of separation. But I will say this, which leads me to my next pro. His route running ability, he runs solid routes, but that's not what's going to win him the day at the next level. What's going to help him do some big things at the next level is he already has mastered the art of the subtle push-off. I talk about this with slower tight ends all the time. You've got to learn from the school of Jason Witten, where you get to the stem of your route and you're ready to break out, and you just give a subtle little elbow. Just nothing egregious that forces the official to throw the flag. Just a nice little nudge, maybe a little lean at the top of the stem of the route, maybe a little lean and then a little elbow that creates just enough separation for the quarterback to get you the football. He already has that down pat. I'm watching this guy run slants, lean into the defender, little elbow, boom, break inside, ball on time, and he's got a nice little catch. A little in-breaking route, quick little, a little lean, and then a little elbow, boom, breaks inside, ball's there. He's able to catch it. And sometimes that's all you need, and he's already mastered that. So he understands, look, I'm not going to beat anybody with elite quickness. I know I've got to win by using craftiness, and he's already starting to do that at the collegiate level. So really love that he does that. Good catch radius with the athleticism, 38-inch vert, and the ability to jump. Good toughness, shows that in the run game and willing to stick his nose in there and be physical at the point of attack. Run blocking ability, he blocks as an inline tight end. Don't necessarily love him out in space as a guy that's, say, the head of a trips formation and they're throwing a wide receiver screen. Don't necessarily love him in those situations where he's got to go seek a guy out. Don't think he changes directions well enough to be able to get a quick guy in front of him and keep him in front of him. But I love him lined up in line as a tight end and a guy that can seal the edge in the run game. Pass blocking ability, can stay in and block if need be. Watched him do so in 2016 versus Oklahoma State, and I thought he was very effective in doing so. So I love the fact that he can do that if need be as well. Good awareness in terms of where the sticks are, how to sit down in zone, how to keep going versus man, and things of that nature. Versatility, in line, split out wide, in the slot, offset. He does it all, and he lined up quite a bit out wide in some formations. Trips to one side. He was the single receiver to the opposite side, and they just set up some situations where they just got the football to him on some slants and some fades and things of that nature. So he was a guy that they used in a number of ways at Central Michigan. Collegiate production was really good, especially after having not really played the tight end position, to come over and really just have that 1 year to learn and then boom, jump in, hit the ground running and make the plays that he was able to make his final 2 years on campus. Good stamina, and they forced it to him. There was a game versus Ohio, his first game back in 2017 after the broken foot, and I watched him eviscerate Ohio's defense. He single-handedly took them apart and tore them a new asshole in that football game. So this is a guy that first game off of an injury, you'd think that he wouldn't have his football legs and lungs back, and yet he was out there just dogging those boys. So the stamina is really good, and he's a red zone threat. Here's a guy, 11 career touchdowns in his career, but they loved getting him the football in the red zone. I watched him against Oklahoma State in 2016 run the fade ball, tap it to himself, and keep his knee inbounds as he's falling out of bounds, catch the football. Watched him versus Ohio run a seam ball right up the middle of the field, catch it in the red zone. So he's a viable threat to hurt you in the red zone as a target. So a lot to like here with Tyler Conklin. But the one con that I see from him right now is that quickness, suddenness, it just isn't in his DNA. He doesn't have the ability to win just off of quickness, shaking a guy or anything of that nature. He's not going to win on those routes that demands that a guy wins with a little bit of creativity or with a little bit of stick nod action. He's not winning that way. He's going to win with being very crafty, and he's going to win by setting guys up pre-snap and widening guys. If you're trying to get to the inside, well, you're looping towards the outside just to step back inside and get him. I saw him cross a guy over versus Ohio. He was leaning outside. Defender opened up his hips. He did a swim move inside. Football was on time. He was able to make a play. That's how he's going to have to win. And so the quickness, the suddenness, it just isn't there with Tyler Conklin. But I love this acquisition. You've got David Morgan the second. You've got ex-Notre Dame tight end. His name escapes me. Kyle Rudolph. You've got some guys there that you like. You're going to add Tyler Conklin to that mix, and I think he's going to have an impact on this offense. Kirk Cousins loves his tight ends. I think Tyler Conklin is going to be a guy that he's going to grow to love in the future. 5th round, 157th overall selection. Tight end out of Central Michigan. Tyler Conklin, for me, is fifth round, 167th pick overall, specialist out of Auburn, Daniel Carlson is the selection. .6'5", 213, so good size here on Daniel Carlson. I'll give you his pros quickly, then we'll jump through some cons, and then we'll get out of here. He's a kicker. You know we can't spend but so much time on him. Leg strength is a plus. 13 field goals of 50 yards or more while at Auburn, including a career-high 56-yarder that looked like it was good from about 61. So this guy's got definitely some leg strength there. 92 of 114 in terms of field goals for an 80% clip while at Auburn, and a few of those were blocked. Low trajectory kicks that came out low because of the distance of the kicks. They were all from 50 or further. So you take those out of the mix, and he's probably a little bit closer to 85% than he is 80, but nonetheless, never missed any extra points, which to me, it's inexcusable to miss an extra point at the collegiate level. You miss an extra point, you have some explaining to do, because they kick from the old NFL extra point, which is a 20-yard field goal, essentially. No reason to miss that whatsoever. 70% of his kickoffs went for touchbacks, so you're getting a guy that also doubles as a kickoff specialist. So you got to love that a guy can kick field goals, kickoff specialist, and he punted the football while at Auburn in his freshman year. So also has that in the repertoire. If the punter goes down mid-game, you've got a guy that can step in and do a little bit of that as well. SEC Special Teams Player of the Year and First Team All-Conference, both in 2016 and in 2017. So again, a guy that was highly decorated while at Auburn. And like I said, punted in his freshman season, averaged 42 yards per punt. So again, no slouch in that department either. You go to his cons, does have a low trajectory, which could account for the blocks that he had in college while at Auburn, and also could potentially lead to some blocks in the future as the Minnesota Viking. But nonetheless, that's something that I think he'll be fine in as well. And kickoffs are more of the line drive variety. Doesn't get a lot of hang time on his kicks. So if those kicks aren't going out of the back of the end zone, you could see a situation where some kicks get returned and teams are able to get some quality field position off of some line drive kickoffs down the field. But nonetheless, you didn't break any rules here. Okay, took the guy in the 5th round or later, as you were supposed to. He's a guy that does multiple things. I like kickers. If you're gonna take a guy that does if you're gonna take a specialist, I like specialists that can double or triple in multiple situations. This guy's a field goal kicker. This guy's a kickoff specialist, and he can punt if need be. I love that. And also, last thing, if you're getting a field goal kicker, I need 80% or better in terms of the clip that he's kicking at for his career. He hit 80 right on the head. So again, no rules broken here by the Vikings. Big leg kicker. Also kicks off, can punt if need be. What's there not to like here? He's going to come in and get a chance to really help this Vikings team. And they're hoping that they get the guy that they got early on in the career of Blair Walsh, where he was a weapon in his rookie season. You're hoping Daniel Carlson is similar to that, but for a much longer period of time. In the 5th round, 167th pick overall, Auburn specialist Daniel Carlson is 6th round, 213th pick overall, offensive lineman out of App State, Colby Gossett is the selection. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on Colby Gossett. Thought he was really solid. I didn't see anything wrong with this guy, but he didn't move the needle for me one way or the other. He's one of those guys that if he started down the line, it wouldn't shock me. If he was a career backup, it wouldn't shock me. He's solid. None of his attributes stick out. None of them. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this guy, but 6'5", 311, 34-inch arms, 5'2", 40, 32 reps of 2 1/4, 46 career starts, 39 of which were amassed in 3 straight seasons, of which he didn't miss a game to finish up his career. So 31 of those were at right guard. The other 8 were at right tackle. So you get a guy with a little bit of versatility here. Quickly, I watched him in 2 games because I want to see this guy against elite talent. I watched him against Miami in 2016. I thought he was really good. Thought he held his own, looked good. He opened up some massive holes in that game, and I thought he did a bang-up job versus Miami in that aggressive, talented front that they have in Miami. And then I watched him against Georgia in 2017, and that was equally as impressive, and that's equally as aggressive and talented a group in Georgia. And I thought he held his own there. And like I said, nothing wrong with what I saw out of this guy. think he has solid movement skills, although he won't wow you with the way he picks them up and puts them down. When he gets his hands on guys, he does a really good job of sustaining the block. When he's out in space, he whiffs a ton. But again, I'm not going to beat this guy up. He's solid, and he's right now for what you drafted him as, which is a backup interior offensive lineman. He gives you a little bit of versatility because he can play tackle. I don't know how good of a tackle he is. I didn't get to watch him as a tackle, so I can't really talk to you about if he adds value there. If this guy is good enough, then he should be able to take some snaps at center if you don't love him as a tackle. If you like him as a tackle, then the versatility that he brings on game day as a guy that can play both guard positions and right tackle will be absolutely invaluable, and he'll have a spot on this roster. If he doesn't show the versatility to play tackle, then he better be able to play center in both guard positions if he wants to remain on this roster. But nonetheless, in the 6th round, 213th overall pick, Colby Gossett for me is as we move to the next 6th round selection, 218th overall pick, edge rusher out of Tulane, Ade Aruna is the pick. So Ade Aruna is 6'5", 262 pounds. And I always talk about at the end of a draft, in the 6th round, in the 7th round, that's when you're supposed to take a height, weight, speed specimen, a guy that maybe underachieved or still doesn't really know what the hell he's doing yet with his raw athletic gifts and raw physical talents, probably doesn't know what he's doing yet. You draft that kind of guy and hope you unearth a diamond in the rough late in the draft, and that's essentially what the Vikings have done here with Ade Aruna. Is they're looking at a guy that only has 6 years of football experience under his belt after coming over from Nigeria to play basketball. He ends up playing football, and this is a guy that is just dripping and oozing of every athletic physical gift that you could ask for, and he just doesn't know what the hell he's doing right now, and that's the job of the Vikings, to get this guy up to speed and get him and mold him into the player that they want him to be. I liken him to, and again, he's not on the same level in terms of talent, but I liken him to Danielle Hunter in terms of the rawness that this guy possesses, yet having extreme athletic ability. Danielle Hunter, when you drafted him out of LSU, was raw as raw could be, and we've seen him mature into the player that he's become, and I think he's due for a breakout year this season is Danielle Hunter, and you're hoping that you can do the same thing with Ade Aruna. 6'5", 262, 34-inch arms, 4'6", 40, 18 reps of 2 1/4, 38.5-inch vert, 10.6 broad. The guy is stupid. We saw him at the combine light it up. So you knew that this guy was athletically gifted. As I mentioned before, only 6 years of football experience. The guy played his final year of high school, and that was enough to get him a 3-star designation and a scholarship to Tulane on just 1 year. That's how gifted this guy is. 1 year of football in high school. His first year ever playing football was enough to get him a scholarship to Tulane, which he then redshirted and then played the rest of his career as an edge rusher. 12 career sacks, 19 tackles for loss, 4 PBUs, and 3 forced fumbles. As I mentioned before, this is a guy that he doesn't know what he's doing right now. Measurables, athleticism, stupid, off the charts. Explosiveness. I saw him beat a guy versus Memphis in 2016. Off the snap, guy never had a shot. Turned the corner at about 7.5 yards. Guy never stood a chance. Went straight to Riley Ferguson and sacked him. That's the kind of explosiveness that the Vikings are looking to tap into. Awareness is solid. He's still got a ways to go there. Again, you would expect that from a guy that's only been playing football for 6 years. Sets the edge well, uses his length to bench press guys, keep them at bay. Redirect is really solid. Run, ability versus the run is solid as well. Saw him stand up a couple of guys, stand up a tight end, stand up a tackle, and then jump off of that block, so shed them and make a play versus SMU in some other situations. So this guy does have some ability. Tackling ability is solid. Motor and endurance, I thought he was really consistent with his motor. Impact on the game isn't where you want it to be at this point. They did some things with him at Tulane that I wasn't a big fan of. In 2016, he was kind of playing that wide 9 technique, which I thought was pretty much where he needed to be, outside of the tackle, giving him a chance to win with pure speed off the edge. They kicked him inside a little bit. They shortened his split, and they really reduced it to the point where he was essentially lined up over the tackle, almost like a 4 technique. I didn't like that at all. I thought that was garbage, and I thought it put him at a very distinct disadvantage because he didn't get to use his athleticism in that kind of setting. And his production dipped from 2016 to 2017. So I think that can be a little bit misleading. And if you watch him in 2017, you may not see the same type of player that I saw in 2016. So I think the Vikings understand what this guy is good and best at and how they can utilize him. I fully expect this guy to make this roster because I think they want at least an opportunity to try to tap into all of the gifts that this guy has. And if it doesn't work after 2 years, maybe then you end the experiment. But they want to give this guy every opportunity to be a successful pass rusher at the next level. And I like where he landed in Minnesota because they do a really good job of development with their guys. And I think he's a guy that has some talent. As you go to his cons, hand usage, it's non-existent right now. That's something he's going to have to learn how to use to go along with that explosiveness. There's no move Rolodex. I didn't see a spin. I didn't see a hard outside back inside. I didn't see him setting guys up, which leads me to my other con as a pass rush plan. There's no pass rush plan right now, no PRP. So because of that, his pass rushing ability is lacking behind his athleticism. But that's the job of the Vikings. When you take a guy this late in the draft, obviously there are deficiencies. That's why he's sitting here in the 6th round. But his athletic gifts give you an opportunity to work with him and see if you can't get something out of what he brings to the table from a physical standpoint and an athletic standpoint. So in the 6th round, 218th overall selection, edge rusher out of Tulane, Ade Aruna, for me, is as we wrap up this Vikings draft in the 7th round, 225th overall selection, linebacker out of California, Devante Downs is the selection. .6'2", 252 pounds, so really good size here for Devante Downs. Played in 40 games, started 20 of them, 23 reps of 2 1/4. He tore his ACL in 2017, missed the final 5 games of his collegiate career, was on pace for a career season before the injury, and I have a lot of questions because of that injury, so that's going to greatly affect this man's grade. Also had an injury that cost him the final 4 games of 2015, so we're seeing a little bit of a trend here with him having injuries that force him to miss extended periods of time. 8 career sacks, 14.5 tackles for loss, 5 INTs, including 1 to the crib, 3 PBUs, 3 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries on his resume as well. Measurables at 6'2", 252. He's a really good size linebacker, one that can take on blockers and really plug a hole. So from that standpoint, you really like what he brings to the table from a measurable standpoint. Speed is something that I think he lacks. I put down in my notes because of the ACL tear. Of course, we didn't get to see this guy run. He was not able to test during the pre nor post draft process. So I put down in my notes, he looks like a guy that is in the range of a 4.66 to a 4.72. I think he's closer to the 4.72 than he is the 4.66. Nonetheless, I don't see a guy that could afford to lose a step to a ACL tear. So I'm hoping that he comes back better than ever, because if he loses a step to this ACL, he could be in some serious trouble. Athleticism, it's solid. It's not great. It doesn't wow you. Acceleration, when you get to see him open up and run, you see this guy And that's why I think he's got a shot to be 4.66, is because when I got to see him open up and run, I saw a guy that flashed a little bit of explosiveness versus Washington State and Weber State. Two beautiful plays where he strips ball carriers from behind, having to run them down. And so those were gorgeous plays where guys just thought they were in the clear. Here comes Devante Downs with a tomahawk one time and a bolo punch the other time. So he's really talented from that perspective and very aware of being able to punch the football out. Awareness is good, although he will bite down on play action fake. He's a very cautious defender, and what I mean by that is he's methodical and calculated in his movements. Not a guy that's going to come screaming downhill. That's why he doesn't have a bunch of tackles for loss. He's one of those guys that will probably more so play behind a block before he is aggressive and looking to attack the line of scrimmage. I'm not a huge fan of guys who do that per se, but there's a method to his madness. He knows that he can't afford to attack the line of scrimmage aggressively because his change of direction isn't all that great. So if he's to overrun something, he's probably not going to be able to get back into the play. He's able to shed and slip blocks occasionally, but he does a really good job of taking on blocks. I was really impressed watching him take on blocks, and he has the frame to be able to do so. Man coverage is solid. I wouldn't advise teams to put him in that situation. So if you're the Vikings, I think you would like this guy in zone way more than you would in man. I think he gets good depth on his zone drops. Saw him pick off a pass versus North Carolina that was ultra impressive. Read the eyes of the quarterback, took him straight to the football, continued to gain depth on his drop as he saw what the quarterback was trying to go with the football, then leaps up, snatches the football out of the air, and gets a very quality return after the interception. So I think he's a guy that in zone coverage can do some really good things. Blitzing capability, they blitz him a ton at Cal. He was a guy that they love to send on some delayed blitzes and some double A-gap pressures. He's a guy that when unblocked can be a really good blitzer. Saw that against Ole Miss as he got a sack late in that ball game to wrap it up versus Ole Miss. And so this is a guy that on some delayed blitzes does a really good job of closing the distance between he and the quarterback very, very quickly. And I think he times it up pretty well, too, for a guy coming off the pace with not the most athleticism possible that we've seen out of guys. He's a guy that does a good job of timing it up. And to me, blitzing is all about timing. You know, you see guys with all the athleticism in the world, all the speed in the world, and they telegraph that they're coming, and the center or the guard is able to clip them off and pick them up with ease. He does a good job of waiting to the last second and then blitzing. And then his range is solid, but again, not a guy that I trust going sideline to sideline. But in any event, he's probably really a double. What I saw on tape was good enough to warrant a double, but because this guy's coming off of a torn ACL and I just don't know what I'm getting, I'm not comfortable giving this guy a double. So in the 7th round, 225th overall selection, linebacker out of Cal, Devante Downs for me to wrap up this Vikings draft is So that's the Vikings draft in a nutshell. If you're looking for the scores of each and every individual player, check out the website LouieTeeNetwork.net for a breakdown of the draft, a quick synopsis, and also you'll get the scores for each and every single player in this draft. Make sure you're supporting the podcast, the Louie Tee Network podcast. Make sure you're supporting the Louie Tee Network on YouTube. Like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. You can also support me through Patreon. All of that is down in the description of this video. You can support me through PayPal. You can support me through just continuing to watch and support the channel, and I appreciate all of that. And I'm going to also add in Cash App here shortly, so that'll be another way that you can support the movement here on the Louie Tee Network. But this was a quality draft, not one of my favorites, as I mentioned at the top, but there are some guys that I am uber intrigued by. Mike Hughes to start. I want to see how they employ him and where he is going to be utilized. Is he going to be a guy that gets to touch the football on special teams as well? Jalen Holmes, as you know, one of my favorite players in this draft. I think that this guy has a chance to have a huge impact on his Vikings defense. And then Ade Aruna is a guy that I really look at and say, if they can get the most out of him, he could be one of the steals late in this draft. Tyler Conklin is a guy that I think can help this offense. So overall, quality draft. Let's take a look at the score that the Vikings ended up getting as Rick Spielman completes this 2018 draft. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this draft wrap-up of the Minnesota Vikings. I've got plenty more where that came from, so stay tuned. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. I'll see you guys next time. Remember, we're changing the game one video at a time. And once again, rest in peace to Tony Sperano. My prayers are with your family and your extended family of the Minnesota Vikings and all of those that he touched around the National Football League. I'll see you guys next time.
Louie Tee Network.